My name is Courtney Ware. I'm an editor. I live in Dallas, Texas. And I've been working in this industry for like 14 years now. I started off as a producer and a director. When I directed my first feature film, I ended up editing it as well and really fell in love with editing then. I started as an assistant to a director, and so he would have me do probably more things than I should have been allowed to do at like 18. And so I ended up producing, I was a co-producer for one of his films before the age of 21. And so I sort of was going along that route, but definitely getting my hands into every aspect.
So is that where you started getting into editing software?
Yeah, like I started on Final Cut and got a few jobs in Avid, and I was like a Final Cut evangelist. I loved it, and I would tell everyone about it, and then they broke my heart with Final Cut 10. I took it very personally. And so right around then, I had a friend of mine that had told me about Premiere. I hadn't used it before, and so I just jumped in on a project, and I was like, oh, good. Okay, I'm okay now. And I've been on Premiere ever since.
You have assistants, or is it just you?
Normally it's just me.
Okay.
On Miss Juneteenth, for the first time, I was given an assistant, Laura Tolotson.
Fancy.
And I was so happy, and she was amazing. And so this was her first film, and so I got to sort of walk her through a few things, and then it was amazing to be like, hey, can you do this? And so she was taking care of some of the more tedious things that allowed me to really work. So I have not ever been like an official assistant editor, so I didn't quite know what to hand off. And so there's a little bit of that learning curve where it's like, well, wait, if I don't do that, then how do I know what's there? So we really started with just her organizing and naming the takes and whatnot. I'm not super sacred about like my projects. They have to stay organized. I don't like it when people disorganize them. But as far as people seeing like the in-process stuff, I'm not too protective about it. I am a little bit protective of just not having someone over my shoulder, but outside of that, it's hard to not have a person in the room watching you. So Miss Juneteenth is set in Fort Worth, Texas, and Texas was actually the last state to sort of adopt the Emancipation Proclamation. So they're the last state to free their slaves. And so in the African American community, Juneteenth, which was June 19th, is celebrated almost in a larger way than the 4th of July. And so this film is set in Texas around the Miss Juneteenth pageant. So it's about a mother-daughter, and the mother had been a winner of Miss Juneteenth 10 years ago, and now, or more than that, and now she is trying to have her daughter go through the same pageant. So it's at its core, this mother-daughter relationship set around sort of the Texas world.
And so when you first dive into your editing and do you know how many hours of footage you got?
No, I should count though. It's a lot.
Is it hundreds?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well, because there's a parade in the film, and so like we sort of piggybacked off of an actual parade, and so we had 2 cameras rolling for that, and so the parade sequence is like a minute and a half, but we had an entire day of footage, almost docu-style with that, and then we shot 23 days, and so yeah, it was. I should do like the stats in this.
So you had a pile of footage.
Yes.
To go through, which is in itself a whole nother job.
Yes.
So did you watch it front to back, or did you dive into the script? How did you kind of start off?
I read the script once, usually before production. And then my favorite thing to do is actually to edit on set. I did not on this project, but I was editing about a day behind. And so I was constantly keeping my eye on what we were getting so that I could give feedback and whatnot. And then there would be certain sequences where that were higher priority that we wanted to make sure that we got right or didn't need anything. So I only read the script once because the film is not the script. But obviously I know like who everyone is and whatnot. I will usually I like to get my assembly done pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll usually, if there's a script supervisor, talk with them and essentially take the circle takes first.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of assemble it based off of that, and then that's our starting point. I do go and look through every minute of footage, but I like to know kind of where we are and get it on the timeline first. So I, opposite though, when it comes to stuff like the parade sequence, I had just a string out and was just like watching and marking, and so it kind of depends on the sequence, how I'll attack it. But I do like to get things on the timeline because I feel more comfortable when I know where we are,
Mm-hmm.
and know what I'm looking for or what I need to find when I go back and look at everything.
Do you remember how long your first assembly was?
Yes. It was 2.5 hours long.
Okay. Which,
as the editor, I was like, we're in a great place. And then when we started talking about cutting everything down, it's like, of course, as the writer-director, she wants to keep everything, and I want to keep everything also for her. But you start really talking about what the film is telling you. And so that obviously means cutting a huge chunk out. And, Channing's script was very tight. And so our B and C storylines were very tightly connected to the A storyline. And so it's not like you could just pull a scene and it not have a million repercussions. And so it was hard to just be able to sort of take these sequences out and still get everything across that we needed to get across. So it was quite a process.
So in that process, were there things that maybe you wanted and they didn't, or you both thought were like, oh, we gotta do it, and you ripped it?
Yeah.
Oof. How did that stuff go?
It was an emotional day. We did what I called the chainsaw cut, and it was brutal. And
where is that?
That was probably like our fourth cut or so, where we realized we've got to really chop this thing down and rip the Band-Aid. And so I just went through and it didn't make sense. It was like an hour long. It was just like obviously not the movie. But what it did was allowed us to see what we were missing. And that was a big point. And so then it was talking about what to put back in.
So you went back after, and then you just put it back, and it all started to kind of...
Yeah, well, and around that same time of the chainsaw cut, one of the things that I tend to always do is restructure the film. And I mean, in that way, editing is just like writing. It's just what is sort of coming to light. And so we actually wrote down every beat of the film and on sheets of paper and sat on the floor and rearranged them. And then once we got that, and we're pulling scenes out, we would keep notes for what we had cut versus what was in. And then it's just trial and error. And so I would look on my floor, rearrange the sequence, and then and then that was sort of our new starting off point.
Now that you see it at Sundance and it premiered, how was it to see everything put together and final?
Yeah, it was great. It was, I actually had a job on the day that we were supposed to QC the DCP. And so I didn't even get to see the final mix. And so it was really exciting to be able to see it in its final glory and know that all of the hard work was paying off and feel it with an audience. It's really important. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That feeling must be awesome.
It's good.
So a big theme I'm seeing in Sundance this year is accessibility, not just for marginalized groups, kind of across the board for everybody, which is awesome to see. And one of the things that struck me is kind of software isn't necessarily talked about in terms of accessibility. It's you can buy Adobe Premiere for $50 a month. I
think back when I was on Final Cut and that you had to find $900 to somehow just get one copy of it. And it was I asked for it for Christmas and got half, and so I was constantly having to try and find computers that already had it or whatever. And so honestly, the subscription-based model that has kind of in the last few years been adopted by a lot of companies, I think is the way to go. because it does allow you, even if you need to pay for it for just 3 months, that's way more doable than like a license. And then for me, I have a lot of friends who prefer to they just want to own the thing. But I like the fact that it's constantly being updated. That I had a random job where I needed the character animation tool in After Effects. I'm not an After Effects person. Like so I like downloaded After Effects and downloaded the separate like character animation tool, and I was on my way. And normally I would have had to like try to find a key and blah blah blah. Yeah. And so for this random project that popped up, I was able to still do my job. I mean, let's be honest, Google and YouTube. I mentioned earlier that I'm still finding things that I didn't know these programs could do. And so there are often times that I'll Google something and then watch for free a tutorial. Just walk through it and then it's done. And so I do think like those, yes, you can pay for the tutorials and whatnot, but so many people are putting content online where they're, just filming themselves creating these things and telling you how to do it. It makes it a whole lot easier. Yeah,
it's funny. I tell people a lot that 13-year-old kids teach me how to do After Effects.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I'm making titles and stuff.
Absolutely.
So the accessibility, you're right, to YouTube, as long as you can weed through the nonsense, it's out there. Just Google the right thing and you know how to export from Premiere or send to Resolve.
Exactly.
Or whatever.
I like who needs to go to school anymore? It's a terrible quote. I'm sorry.
No, it's actually a good point. How did you go to film school?
I did.
So I get a lot of pushback, and I went to a university, and I think it was an amazing thing that not necessarily the film stuff, but books or just stuff you would normally wouldn't encounter. Do you think film school these days is helpful? I mean, if you can afford it, because obviously it's ridiculous. But
here's how I feel about it. I feel like you need to do something where you're not stupid. So is that going to school? Great. If it's learning on your own, great. Whatever that is for you, do that. I was working already on film sets. There was a couple TV shows that were filming in Dallas that I was PAing on. And so I was getting a lot of that on-set experience in actual working. And so what I ended up doing in film school was trying to take more theory classes to kind of get that side of it. But also I was like a really bad student because I was so antsy to get back on set. And so it's like, whatever you need to do to be able to learn is the point. So if it's watching a bunch of YouTube tutorials, great. But like, don't just go into something and not know what you're doing. So that's my advice and how I feel about it. Just don't be stupid.